Now back to our main story, the disturbances in Moscow. We've just received this report from our Moscow correspondent, Julian Mannion.
The dramatic events that could change Russia began at a place called the Crimea Bridge, where 10,000 opposition demonstrators walked straight into a wall of police. The wall buckled and broke, the start of a vicious running battle along the Moscow ring road, a battle in which Boris Yeltsin's police proved unable, or sometimes unwilling, to halt the army of hardline protesters. Policemen fired shotguns and CS gas, but they were repeatedly overwhelmed by the mob. Some panicking officers tried to flee on their bus, but the demonstrators set it on fire with a petrol bomb. A truck driver used a gas spray to try to defend himself and got rocks back in return. A savage fight in the cab ended when his truck smashed into the one in front. Another officer was caught by the mob and beaten. And all the while, demoralized policemen were falling back in the direction of the White House. At the Parliament building, the demonstrators, some now carrying police shields, stormed the barricade of water trucks. And once again, the police lines broke. As the first people to break through waved triumphantly on the steps of the White House, firing broke out. Interior Ministry troops tried to drive back the attackers by firing their Kalashnikovs in the air. But the demonstrators did not retreat and replied with a hail of stones and crowbars. The battle was over, and the supporters of Rutskoy and Hasbulatov cheered their triumph. As his men celebrated, Alexander Rutskoy emerged from the office where he has spent most of the last 13 days of siege. He urged the crowd to continue their uprising by seizing the state television service. Below him, some 200 deserters from Yeltsin's police were being incorporated into the White House Guards. Tonight, opposition supporters are celebrating around the White House after what has been a catastrophic day for Boris Yeltsin. The president staked his entire prestige on the siege of this building, and that siege has now been broken. The question now is whether Yeltsin has the authority left to muster his supporters for some kind of counterblow. Tonight, Boris Yeltsin flew back by helicopter to the Kremlin. He has declared a state of emergency, but the question is what he can now do to try to repair today's defeat. Julian Mannion, ITN, in Moscow.
For the latest live now to Julian Mannion. Julian, what is happening now?
Well, right now, a whole series of further dramatic events are taking place. We've just heard, for example, that Ostankino Television, that's the state-run station in Moscow, has gone off the air, apparently after being invaded by armed militants on behalf of Mr. Rutskoy's forces. We heard earlier that Rutskoy had ordered them to go down there. And beyond that, we're also hearing that APCs, that's armored vehicles, are moving round the Moscow ring road at the opposite end of it to the White House. Their destination and purpose at the moment is unclear.
Is it possible for you to judge for us how much support the rebels command?
Well, that's been the great debate ever since this series of events began. Clearly, it's not mass majority support in the sense that there were still only some 10 to 15,000 people in the streets. But this hardcore is extremely determined. As you could see from the pictures, they literally would hardly stop at anything. They simply burst through the police lines. And this really is the problem that Yeltsin has stirred up by his decision to suspend Parliament. And that is that this fanatical, hardcore opposition is ready really to fight him at every turn. And it must be said that today they have scored really a significant success. The president staked his authority on what was taking place down at the White House, and it has rebounded on him very badly, and we really have to wait and see whether he can recover from this blow.
Julian Mannion in Moscow, thank you very much.